So recently we started a new series that was geared towards web developers and web designers. And we decided that there was a need to understand the web. Previously, in our lesson, we spoke about the web, we spoke about the internet, and we spoke about the web browsers. Now, we said the web was a series of interconnected documents and resources, online documents, which will be in the form of HTML, which will be in the form of web pages, which will be in the form of PDFs, and resources as well. People access the web for information. Okay. In order to do that, these documents that live on the internet can be accessed by people using IP addresses. And we spoke that IP addresses were more like the protocol which people use to access the internet. And the internet was like the road linking people to the web resources. And we said that the web browsers were like tools which people used to access the web using the internet. And we also spoke about how we need to design with this in mind, with the infrastructure of the internet, the web, and the browsers in mind. Today, we will talk about the technologies available on the web, currently available on the web. So if you're a web developer, if you're a web designer, this is where your decisions will begin, because there are so many tools and you have to make a decision to choose one over the other, depending on your preference. And sometimes depending on the task at hand. And it's going to be an interesting conversation today. And I hope you follow me and we'll be able to come to a conclusion. Today, we won't write any code. We won't write any code because we are getting introduced to what is involved. Later on, we'll make those decisions. Okay, so let's dig into your website, the technologies and the implementation that are involved. So we start with the technologies encompass of a wide range of tools, the languages, and the platforms that facilitates the creation. So creation, deployment, and maintenance. First, you create a website. The next thing is, after you create the websites on your local host, so you deploy it, you send it, you upload it online so that it becomes accessible to all people. And maybe you tweak your settings. Then after you realize that, oh, this website is good enough to go public, you can turn that page on to be viewed by the public. So that's the deployment. And the maintenance is from time to time, you have to go in there and then tweak one or two things, depending on what your users are experiencing, depending on what content you want to put out there, depending on. So these three areas, the creation of the website, the deployment of the website, and the maintenance of the website is important. And we said over here that you can find, there are lots of technologies, to be honest with you, but we will classify them into only five, and then we'll try and then dig into these five, because as a developer, if you understand these five tools very well, it will take you far in your career. So the first two we'll look at is web programming languages. The second two will be the web development framework. The third two will be content management systems. And we will explain in the details what these are. The fourth we'll look at are APIs. An API is simply an application programming interface. And we'll talk about what it does and web services. Then we'll talk about database technologies. So let's look at web programming languages. Web programming languages. You see, there are several programming languages, but not each one of them is designed for the web. Some of them are specific for the web. They are used for the web. And so in selecting a language, you have to understand what purpose you are going to use it for. Now, on the web, not every language is versatile. Some of them are very specific in the problems they solve. Okay. HTML is a markup language. Okay. This means that it deals with the structure of the web page and the structure only. It can't do interactivity. It can't do styling. It just focuses on the structure. Now, the appearance of the web page, how it looks, the color, the font size, the tables, the what do I say? The width, how it responds to devices, all of these things contribute to the appearance of the web page. And that is controlled by CSS. So CSS, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading Style Sheets. And it controls the appearance of the page. So how it appears. So think of it this way, that let's say your HTML is like the body standing before you, the body of a human being standing before you, wearing nothing. That's the structure of that person. The CSS is more like the clothes they put on, whether they wear a white shirt, whether they have a tattoo, the things they add up to make them look different or look in a certain way is a CSS. Okay. The functionality and the interactivity, like when I talk about functionality, I talk about maybe you wanted to have specific features or you want them to do specific things or there are specific actions you want them to take. Those things are controlled by scripts. In some of the scripting languages, we have JavaScript, the PHP, Python, and Ruby. So far, I'll say Python is a very common language or the most common language because it's of its orientation towards AI. And today, in today's age, AI is almost something integrated in almost every facet of industry. Then we look at database management. When we want to control our database, SQL or NoSQL is a language that we learn to do that. And these are scripting languages as well to manage our databases. So as you can see, they are so specific such that I can learn SQL to control the structure of my language, or I can't use JavaScript to control the structure of my language. I need to learn HTML to control the structure. For my appearance or style of my page, I need to learn CSS. For my interactivity, I need to understand one of these, JavaScript, PHP. There is even TypeScript. There is Ruby, there is Python. So several scripting languages can help you with the functionality and the interactivity of your page. Then when it comes to your database management, you have to stick with SQL or NoSQL. Now, when it comes to data handling, so maybe you want to transfer data from a server to the user, then you can put it in a file format called XML or JSON. So these languages are very specific towards what they do. Okay. And sometimes you learn a language, and in that language, there are things we call framework. Frameworks are like tools that help make your work faster. And they have certain functionalities to help you speed up with work. So once you get covered with a framework, then maybe there's in CSS, there's a framework called Tailwind. Then Tailwind will help you write CSS faster and better and standardized. Okay. And in JavaScript, they also have frameworks. Okay. So you could learn a framework of a language to help you facilitate things in the language. Okay. But you have to understand the language first. So the first thing is you learn the foundations of the language. Then you can learn a framework that helps you work faster. However, you need to understand what you are doing so that you can tell if something is going wrong. Okay. So I said over here that it's therefore beneficial to have ample knowledge of a language to enable you to gain some degree of control on your website. So you should understand your HTML well, you should understand your CSS well. Ample knowledge. You should have ample knowledge of each of these ones. Okay. So that it helps you. Oh, when you want to do interactivity, you know JavaScript, you can use that. Then you go in for that. When you want to do CSS, you know CSS, you can use that. Then you go in for that. It makes you versatile. However, there are people who also specialize. So in the game of web development, there are, like I was saying, the people specialize. Over here, I said front end framework, back end framework, full stack framework. There are people who specialize in the front end. The front end has to do with the client side. So HTML, your CSS, and your JavaScript. Okay, that's the front end. The back end has to do with your server side. Okay, so your PHP, your Ruby on Rails, your sometimes Python, yeah, and your SQL for databases. Those are server-side languages. Okay, so you can decide to look at this. These are front-end languages, and PHP, Ruby, Python are server-side back-end languages, and these ones too are back-end database, and these ones too. Okay. So depending on where you want to specialize, you can go in for some of them and specialize. That means that if you're a front-end person, you need to work with a back-end person. And the other people who say, oh, I'm full stack. When full stack means that, oh, I can handle every aspect of the uh, the website. That's I can do some HTML, I can do some CSS, and do some JavaScript. So that comes with trade-offs as well. Okay, you have to if someone is very specialized in JavaScript, when you call him to your team, you expect that to bring more functionality because it's very specialized in that area. And so sometimes people prefer specialized people over the full stack people. In other times, others they prefer the full stack people because one person can do a very good job across the entire team, and which is helpful sometimes. So depending on the situation you find yourself, you have to make those decisions. Um, so let's talk about the second technology, which is web development frameworks. Okay. So web development frameworks are simply, let's say, software frameworks that are designed to make your work faster and easier. But you have to first learn the language and then be familiar with the language so that you know how to. And every framework comes with its documentation. So you have to read the documentation and know how to implement that documentation. Okay. So I said over here that software frameworks are designed to support the development of web applications, including web services, web resources, and web APIs. We'll come to all these things, offering a range of tools, libraries, best practices. Libraries are like functionalities or codes that people or developers are creating that you can just tap into or you can just call a function, like the way we call functions in, or we call packages. Okay, so you can have a package written in another language, and you can simply call functionalities of that package to make your work easier. You don't have to write the code ground up. So I said that by offering a range of tools, libraries, and best practices to streamline the development process. And for web development frameworks, you can classify them into three categories. That's what I was speaking about, the front end frameworks. So the front end frameworks are frameworks that has to do with the front end, like CSS, the tailwind that I was talking about. Is a it's a framework for CSS. Okay, HTML2 has its frameworks, JavaScript has its framework, but very popular are JavaScript frameworks. There are quite a lot of them because JavaScript, I think JavaScript code is quite interesting or sometimes. So we have a lot of frameworks trying to solve problems for people. Okay. And back end frameworks too are there. And full stack. Full stack means that when you pick a particular framework, it does some front work, from front end stuff, and then it does some back end stuff. Okay. So let's look at some popular frameworks. Popular frameworks. We can have, so here we are looking at the front end. We are starting with the front end frameworks. I said that we focus on the client side web of web. When you say the client side, is what the users see. Okay. It's all what the users deal with. So they deal with your maybe your CSS, your HTML. They can easily see that when they inspect your code. Okay, they can see that when they inspect your code. So your code, part of your code will be shipped to the browser. Okay, so let's say if I request for, let's say www.google.com, if I request for that, and I come to, that's google.com being loaded to me. I come to inspect, or let me simply go to view page source. View page source. So when I go to view page source, this is the code that was shipped to me. Over here, you can see some get this JavaScript. Okay, that's JavaScript. Some JavaScript I'm seeing. That exception is JavaScript that I'm seeing. And there are HTML as well. So let me go to find HTML. So, so I can see some HTML. This is CSS code actually. So it's like HTML and body. It says that the main way should be it should set it to 400 pixels. So this is kind of controlling the appearance of the body. Okay. And so we have some CSS code in there. We have some all thrown in JavaScript, all thrown in there. We have, so let's continue. So the front end or the client side is the code that is shipped, or the languages that are shipped, often shipped to the browser. And if you have HTML code, it will be shipped there. If you have CSS code, it will be shipped along. If you have some JavaScript, it will be shipped along because it's client side. However, if you've written PHP, Python, Ruby on Rails, those are server-side languages. They live on the server. They will be processed by the server, and the end result will be sent to your browser. So that code will not be shipped to the browser. Okay, it's the end result of that code that will be shipped to the browser. So we call those kind of languages the server-side languages. Okay, so we have things like SQL language, PHP, Python, Ruby on Rails. They are all back-end. So that's what we often term as back-end. Back-end means things that go on in the back-end. The browser doesn't have access to. Okay. things that go on in the front end, the browser has access to. So we say that with the front end, it focuses on the client side of web development, handling user interface and user experience. And these are frameworks. Frameworks, like I said earlier, they make your work faster and easier. Why we adopt framework is that they're able to help you standardize your code for efficiency, and also it helps you work faster. But you need to first understand the documentation, which comes with the framework. And maybe, or I'll say that in the future, I will do some tutorials on some of these popular frameworks so that you can pick them up and then use them in your projects. So we have React as a framework. We have Angular, and we have Vue.js. All of these front end frameworks are JavaScript frameworks. And Vue is a TypeScript. TypeScript is, let's say, a version of JavaScript, or a version of JavaScript that allows people to do more. So most of these frameworks are, the front end frameworks are JavaScript. So it means that if you have to use the framework first, learn JavaScript, understand the syntax of JavaScript, then you come and pick up the documentation of the framework. That makes it easier for you to understand. So React is a library for building user interfaces, and it was developed by Facebook. Angular is developed by Google. Okay, it's a TypeScript based. TypeScript, I told you that it's a form of JavaScript. And Vue is a framework for building user interfaces. So one of the things too you should consider in choosing a framework is the community that surrounds it. A good framework with a good community helps you to ask questions or troubleshoot things easily when you need assistance. Okay. As I was saying, we we kind of adopt these frameworks based on certain decisions. And one of the things you should consider is the community that surrounds the framework you are choosing. Because if you choose a framework that is not like too popular, what happens is along the way, as you are developing, you might encounter problems and you won't have ample people to talk to. But if the framework is well supported, like developed by Facebook and developed by Google, there are lots of people online that use some of these frameworks, and there are lots of developers that use these frameworks. And if you need assistance, you can just go to their community. So let's look at maybe React. I can just type in React. Yes. And that should bring me to React, the website for React. So as you can see, I just placed the logo there too. It's currently it's, what do I say? It's in version 19. Okay. Learn React. So you see, one thing about this is sometimes they have tutorials there too. If you choose a very good one, so it teaches you ground up how to practice React, how to create a button, and how to use. And some of these things, they are to make your work faster. You have to make your work faster. But you have to like first understand the language, how to write a function in JavaScript, how a function looks like. Okay. What is a function at all? What is the word return? The keyword return in JavaScript. You need to understand some of these things to make your work relatively easier. Okay. So first learn the language, then you can proceed to picking the framework. Okay, and Angular, we can just come to this place and type Angular. Angular, yes. So as you can see, the logo is here. So when we come here, you see Angular, download Angular.js. you can download, and sometimes it has tutorials, like I was saying, in the basics. So they teach you some of these things, and there's always a community that you can tap in to learn some of these things very quickly. Okay. Um, and all of these things, React, Vue, Angular, so Vue.js, Vue.js. Why I add JS is JS means JavaScript. Okay, so some of them, most of them, their websites like Vue.js. So you see over here too, there's a progressive JavaScript framework. Like I said, the framework, you have to just so all of these things, they have communities, and the communities help you understand things. So the guide, look, the guide. So when we go to the guide introduction, you can learn. Okay, and it says that learn Vue with video tutorial from viewmastery.com. Okay, what is Vue? So you can see over here some import, create app, set up, return, all of count, all of these things mean something in JavaScript. Okay. And you have to understand how to integrate them into your HTML code and how to call certain functions and do. So first, my advice is just learn the language. Okay. Get an understanding of the language, JavaScript, and then you can move on to learn any framework, front end framework you want to, whether it's React, whether it's Angular, whether you choose to use Vue, that's for you. Okay. And we look at some back end. I told you that the back end has to do with the server side. So there are code that don't get shipped to the browser. So you won't find PHP code in your browser when you inspect it. Okay. You won't find Ruby and Rails code when you inspect. You won't find Python code when you inspect it. This code, often you write them and then you ship them to your server, and the server will do the processing, and the end result is shipped to your browser. So the end result is what gets to your browser. So we call such code server end. And the word we often use interchangeably is backend. So when you go somewhere and someone says, "Oh, I'm a backend developer here," then it means that that person handles what goes on in Python, PHP, or in databases, or so the back end stuff that, and when it says front end, means that it's on the client side. So whatever comes into the browser, that's what they are on, like your JavaScript, like your HTML, your CSS. That's what we mean by front end and back end. So it says the back end focuses on the server side of web development. Okay, the server side. Okay. I explain what the server side is. Handling business logic, database interaction, and server configurations. Okay. So business logic is more like there are conditions that sometimes you give your code to handle. That if it meets this condition, it should do that. If it doesn't meet that condition, it should do that. And database interactions are like sometimes you need to fetch uh, certain information that you've saved on your server uh, by the user. So maybe if I create an account with Google, the next time I'm trying to log in, if I give it my email and my password, um, it's going to grab that information and compare it with what is in their database and give me a feedback on that. So let's say if I have my name and my email, or let's say my email and my password corresponding to what is in their database, then it gives me access to my inbox. If I don't have that correct, then it will ask me to maybe try again or something. But it has to do that comparison with the database. Some things we call them database interaction. Okay, you are interacting with the database through code. And then server configuration. So these are settings of the server. And the server is like, it's a software actually. People think the server is a device sitting there. The server is a software that handles processing. Okay. So you can have it handling some processing of some PHP, you can have it handling processing of your Python, you can have it handling processing of your Ruby and Rails for you. So that's the server. It's a software that handles processing of these things. And by processing, I mean interpretation. So if you can write PHP code, and the server will interpret it and then bring the results to the browser. Okay, so the server kind of does that work, the interpretation of that code, and then bring the result. The JavaScript is shipped directly to your browser because it's front end, and the browser will interpret it. Okay, so even the server does some interpretation, the browser does some interpretation. Files that can be interpreted by the browser or code that can be interpreted are what we call the front end, or the client side code. Okay, and then we have that. So we'll look at a few of the back end frameworks as well. And we have Django. Django is built on Python. Okay, I told you Python is so Django, the web framework. So we can see get started with Django. Download that, so you can download and then install it. Okay. So just this is just like kind of more like a brief introduction. And we have Ruby on Rails. Once you type it into the browser, you can go to the website, look at the documentation, look at in what cases you can use. So Django is a Python framework. So you need to understand the Python first, or you need to get introduced to Python. Once you have a very basic understanding of the Python, then you can start picking up the framework. Ruby on Rails is on Ruby. There's a language called Ruby. Okay, so first Express is on JavaScript, and we call it Node.js. Actually, it's also a framework for JavaScript, but it's client side. But the Express is more like the back end side for it. And Laravel is for PHP. Okay, so I told you that PHP code is back end or on the server side. So when you write PHP code, what's going to happen is your server is going to interpret it, and then the result is sent to the browser. The code is not directly shipped to the browser. Okay. So Laravel is a PHP framework. And all of these things, like we said, they are tools that best do something. So sometimes you have to understand the problem you are solving. If you understand the problem you are solving, then you can decide to choose which tool will be best for you. So if someone says, "Oh, I'm doing a project, I'm doing it with Django," don't simply or blindly just jump and say, "Oh, Django is a good." Look at what the requirements of your project are, okay, and based on that, make a sound decision on which one will help you, okay. And to make a sound decision on which one will help you, you have to look at the pros and cons of each of them, and then you can make that call. Okay. And we finally move to full stack framework. Full stack, like I was saying, full stack deals with both the front end and the back end. Okay. So they combine both the front end and the back end. They provide tools for both front end and back end development, offering more an integrated approach. So you can just get one framework that helps you with some front end stuff, that helps you with some back end stuff as well, or the server side stuff and the client side stuff as well. One of them is called Meteor, and it's based on JavaScript. So, like I said, all you have to also understand that most of these frameworks are built on JavaScript. There are lots of JavaScript frameworks. So, frankly, if you pick the language JavaScript to learn as a web developer, that's a very good start. And in maybe my next videos, I'll try and then do a video to help you with JavaScript. Okay, so that based on that understanding, you can pick other frameworks that you feel they might be useful for you. So main stack is also Mongo, Express. We saw Express here, right? Express. So Mongo databases for databases, Express, and this is Angular. So you see the logo Angular, and Node.js, Node.js. So it combines these kind of frameworks all in one place. Sometimes you find MERN, MERN. Okay, so you find MERN is Mongo databases for databases, Express. Then you have to also, instead of A, you have R. R is React. React. So MERN, MERN, then Node.js. So means that I said is a collection of JavaScript-based technologies. The MongoDB, the Mongo is for databases. Okay. The Express, the Angular, and the Node to develop applications. So, like we were saying that some of these frameworks, each of them may have their limitations. So sometimes if you choose an integrated one or a front, like a full stack, what happens is where Express has a limitation, Angular will make up for it. Where Angular has a limitation, then Node.js or JS will make up for it. Okay. So that's about the full stack. Full stack means that it has certain front end capabilities and it has certain back end capabilities as well. And so, what are some of the benefits of adopting these frameworks that we are talking about? The first thing is efficiency. Okay. They provide pre-built components and libraries, so you don't have to start from scratch, writing everything from scratch. It's been written. Libraries are like functionalities that have been written for you. You just have to call them, or you have to implement them. Then the thing is consistency. Consistency is important because in code documentation, sometimes you need standards to work with. And your code needs to conform to these standards. This is because in the future, if you work according to a standard, then your code becomes easily maintainable by other developers because we all learn and we all work with the same standard. So I kind of understand your language. You also understand my language. It makes it easier for me to look into your code and then maybe write a new version for the code or add up to it. Then another person also adds up to mine. So we have to follow standard operating procedures. So consistency helps you here. And the security, it has to do with the built-in features that helps you protect application from common vulnerabilities. And today we have a lot of hacking going on and that. Then the blessings of using some of these frameworks is that when you use them, they are built by more developers. They are built by, let's say, a group of developers who come together to sit. So you might have someone with security background, you might have someone with technical background, and some of these people, they contribute to building a more robust solution. Okay, contribute to building a more robust solution compared to when you are building it all alone by yourself. And what happens is if it's secured, that helps you too because it protects the code you are going to send online or the website you are going to send online from certain vulnerabilities that might be easily taken advantage of by some bad guys or some hackers. And community support. We spoke about the community support earlier that if you adopt a framework that is popular, what happens is there are large communities and it's about sharing of information and sharing of resources. If you get stuck with a problem, someone can share a resource with you that helps you solve that problem. Okay? Because there is no one man who has figured it all out. We are all learning and we are all getting better through communal system. So take advantage of the communities that come with some of these frameworks as well, and you do much more. And the last one is scalability. So when you build with frameworks, because you build according to standard, it becomes, when the time comes for you to expand, the best practices have been put in place to ensure that expansion becomes very easy. So scale, that's why we have scaling. We are scaling the thing up from maybe the version 1.0 to 2.0 that adds more features and that adds more. Next time, your customers will come to you and say, oh, we wish we could add this, we wish we could do that. And if you build that, frankly, if you build that according to, then that helps you. That helps you. Let's look at the third technology, content management systems. Content management. It sounds like a big word or a new word. However, we've seen them every day. Okay. If you read an item on a blog, if you use an e-commerce website, some of the corporate websites, and even you say, oh, some websites now, maybe you've heard that there are some websites which has technologies that allow you to easily edit the website. And it's because of content, uh, content management systems. So there are, I don't know, frameworks, or how do I say, not frameworks per se, they are more like software platforms. Okay? And what it does is that it's it allows you to create and manage and modify data content on a website without necessarily having extensive technical knowledge. By extensive technical knowledge, maybe you don't know PHP, you don't know SQL, um, you don't know any back-end language. You just know your HTML and your CSS. That's good enough. Your HTML helps you with the structure. Your CSS helps you with the appearance. And sometimes you don't even have to write CSS code because it's already been done by developers. So the software platforms allow you to just put in your content. So if it's a blog post, and this is useful for sometimes corporate organizations, because in a corporate organization, let's say we have a news editor. The news editor may not necessarily understand programming, but he has content to post. Maybe he has content, some news to post. So we should have a portal for him that allows him to share his information without necessarily knowing code. And that's how the content management system comes in. It kind of creates that portal where they can just post things without code. So over here, I said it provides an intuitive interface for organizing content, such as text, images, videos. All of these things can just, with a click, they can be posted to the website without knowing code. So it's more like you write your stuff, you upload, like the way you write an email. You don't have to know technical code to write an email. So you write an email, if you have an image, you add it. If you have it, you add it. Then you click send and it gets sent. Same way, you write the users write the content and then they click send and it goes to the other side, or it gets posted on the website, which is useful. So you don't need extensive technical knowledge to do that. So I said that over here, such as text, images, and videos, and often include tools for collaboration and editing. So you can have tools that allow someone to access it. You add them as a user and they're able to access and then add their content. And you can restrict them to the level of access they have as well over there in terms of publishing. So we often call them CMS. Okay? CMS are widely used for blogs and corporate websites and making web development accessible to non-developers while streamlining content. So you don't have to be a developer to post something online. Okay, like I said. And we popular CMS that we can think of is WordPress. WordPress, maybe you've heard the name, but it's kind of used for blogging. So most bloggers maybe may not understand the technical side of the language or programming, but they're able to, based on their content, they're able to click, they're able to put in text, they're able to add, upload their images and maybe their videos, and then hit send. Okay. Joomla is also an example. And we finally have Drupal. Drupal is also an example of CMS. And I guess maybe the commonest is the WordPress. Okay. And Joomla is also used by a lot of people. And then Drupal. So um, if you can visit the website of some of these CMS, so WordPress, and it takes me to the website of that. Yeah, I know this sponsored because there's a WordPress site, WordPress.com. And over here, I can see hassle-free WordPress, get started, resources, features, pricing. So that's with WordPress, okay? And drag and drop, like you can just drag images, themes, and there are lots of themes that have already been designed in WordPress. So you just come and then start with a theme. You edit it to suit your choice, then or you edit to suit your preference. Then you can, um, as you can see, there are very beautiful things here. Okay. There are very beautiful things here. And then as it scrolls, all of these are themes you can choose from. All you need to do is select a theme, then you start editing your theme, and if there's any form of payment, you make it. So that's about content management system. You don't need to be a technical person to build a website. It's been built, the technical side, the back end side, the software side, the front end side have been built for you. All you need to do is add content. Okay. So you install it on your server, and then you keep adding content. And anyone who goes to it will see the website and will see your content as well. Okay. So these are very popular CMS we have: the WordPress, the Joomla, the Drupal. The fourth technology we'll talk about is APIs and web services. APIs and web services. API simply means application programming interface. Application programming interface. And web services, they are a subset of APIs. So we'll talk about APIs and web services and how they behave. Okay. Usually when you need maybe a request, some form of request, an API is like a middleman who helps you connect to other web resources. So web service, let's say there's a web service you need to tap into. The API is like the middleman who helps you connect to that web resource. And I'll explain it for you to understand. APIs and web services enable different software systems to communicate and interact with each other. Okay. There is one software or server or software system sitting at one end, another sitting here, and they're able to communicate because of the use of API. Okay, API sitting in between them. It's like the middleman. If you tell the API goes to tell the other software. An API defines a set of rules. These are just technical decisions, but we will get to understand why. They define a set of rules and protocols on how software should react to interact. So, like the middleman who says, let's say, he's like the referee of a football match or a football game. He kind of controls the behavior of both parties. He decides what rules which binds both parties, and if there is one, let's say, football team misbehaving, he can decide to sanction them. So that's more like the work of an API, allowing for developers to access features, certain features and data from a service. Okay, so for a service is being provided at one end, but APIs will let you access it based on certain conditions. Okay, so based on certain conditions. So you need that service, and the API helps you to easily do that. So it defines a set of rules and protocols which you can use to do that. Without needing to understand the internal workings of that particular service. Okay? You don't have to understand the internal settings of that particular. And web services are a subset of APIs. They are specially designed to facilitate the communication over the web, standardized protocols using HTTPS. We'll come to what APIs and web services does. Let me explain API in a very practical way for us to get what is involved. Now, let's say we have, let's say we have a website that sells a pair of shoes, and we want our users to be able to purchase with a debit card or a bank card or Visa card. Now, if they provide the details of their card on our website, there should be a way to validate whether that detail is correct. Okay. There should be a way to validate whether the details they are providing for us is not just any numbers before we send them, or before we send them the goods, or before we send them to the next page and say, oh, message confirmed, we billed you or something. And we don't have access, as a website, we don't have access to the database of, or it's the database of Visa. The Visa card is not sitting on our server. However, Visa has developed a service, a web service, and an API helps us access that web service. The web service allows us to confirm information from Visa's database, which sits on their server. But our website doesn't have the database sitting in our server. Visa owns the database, or MasterCard, or depending on the credit card you use, they own the data and it sits on their servers for security reasons. But if we need to use a service, we just want to say, oh, Mr. Visa, can I confirm this is one of your customers? He's trying to buy something from us, but we want to confirm if his card is legit, whether his card has expired, whether his card. So technically, that is what an API, the middleman, does. Our website will talk to that API that, please confirm this card for me. Someone is using this card on my website. Please confirm. So our website talks to that API. And the API goes to, because the API has access to that web service, which hosts their databases, it goes to talk to that web service and say, hey, can you check out this for me, whether it maps to any of the names in your database, whether the card details are correct, whether the amount, the bank balance of the person can purchase this amount of stuff. So the API does all of that. And the API brings us the feedback that, oh, it's okay. You can go ahead with the transaction. Or the API says that, no, we don't think this person has that amount of credit to purchase what he's trying to purchase. So the API comes to us as the website built, and all of these things happen it's so streamlined that it happens in milliseconds. Okay, your website quickly talks to the API. The API goes to the service and gets back with the confirmation. So you don't have the database of that person sitting on your web service or your web server. You don't have that person, their information sitting there. However, you're able to use the services of Visa, the web service of Visa, using an API that sits between you and Visa. Okay, so that is one way we integrate API. So when let's say I'm developing the code for that website, when I get to the payment portion, Visa has put out an API code that allows me to grab that code and then integrate it on my website. Okay. So let's say I can come here and then say Visa payment API code. I'm trying to figure out to see if I can fetch. So getting started with, so I'm going to the Visa Development Center. So this is for developers. Okay, I'm going there to fetch their API so that I can integrate it in my website. I can integrate it in my website and then use it. Okay. Is it getting started? How does it work? So this is my website, the client. Then that's the internet. That's Visa. Okay. So we can see some sort of communication going back and forth. Okay, over here. So the authorization happens here between and the acquirer happens here. So there is some form of communication going on in between. And the API is so it says authorization API. Capture API request is required. Sale API with goods and services. So it says that for further information, contact developer@visa.com. Okay. So that's what happens. I can go and then say, okay, well, sale API. I want to check whether the sale API is used to purchase goods and services that are delivered immediately to the consumer. So some of these payments we will need we will need it to be very fast because sometimes the payments happen instantly. Let's say it's an ebook on my website. Once the person issues their credit card details, I have to supply the book, or if I have to make the e-version available instantly. So if they supply it and I'm not able to talk to the API, who talks to the web service and then gives me the feedback, then that means that I can't make that transaction because if I allow them to download it, then it means they've used it without paying for it. So that's why we need API services. So we said over here that an API defines a set of rules and protocols for how software components should interact and allowing developers to access specific features or data from a service which they don't have on their website or which they don't have on in their server or a library or platform without needing to understand the internal workings of that particular um, service or web service or server. Then we say web services are subsets of API, basically designed to facilitate the communication. Okay. And let's look at how um, an API works. Okay. So there's a client who is a web or he sits here, and that's the API. Okay. That's the API sits here. That's a web service sit here. So first, a request in the form of HTTP. In my previous video, I explained what HTTP is. HTTP is the protocol, or the HTTP is the protocol that are used to communicate over the internet. Okay, we call them hypertext transfer protocol, and the S stands for secure. So when that request comes through HTTP, it hits the API. Then the API says, "Oh, okay, you want to confirm the information of this credit card. Then, okay, let me talk to Visa's web service. Okay, because I'm sure they have that. Now he processes the request and then sends to Visa's web service, which is here too. Then Visa checks with the details that have been provided and looks into his database and says, oh, this person, I'm not sure he's a credit worthy person. He fetches the data and then performs the action. Then the response is sent via JSON or XML. So I spoke to you earlier that JSON and XML is for handling data. So once it sends it back to the API. It sends it back to the API using JSON or data. Then the API now comes back to tell us, say, oh, I've checked with Visa. This person is not credit worthy. I don't think his credit card is correct, or the details on his credit card is correct. Then based on that, your code can say, okay, if the response is yes from the API, allow the person to buy. If the response is no from the API, deny the person that purchase. So your code automatically denies the credit card. And the user will see it on their computer and say, credit card denied or information not correct. Or it's not because they have their database on your server. It's because your server is talking to, or your your computer is talking to another API. Your service is talking to another API who is also talking to a web service that has that data you are looking for. Okay. So this flow demonstrates how APIs, clients, or the clients, we mean the website or the mobile behaves. Okay. So it's just a simple process diagram, but it helps explain the concept of API because it's most people like they can't get the practicality of it. When you ask them what an API is, they know the definitions, but when it comes to the practice, and that is one thing you come with learning web development, you realize that learning will come easy or understanding will come very easily based on experience. So if you've done some of these things in the past, then you have a more hands-on explanation to some of these, how the workings of some of these things. So I'll say that practice is the okay. Practice every opportunity you get as a web developer, as a web designer, take advantage and then practice. Because through practice, you are going to understand some of these things better. So this is explaining the flow process. First, the client app. You say that the client app is the user-facing application. That's the website of where the user is sitting to send the request to the API. Okay, the API acts as an intermediary, like I said, like a referee between the client and the web service. The web service is like the visa. The client is you. So the API is standing between the two of you. And receiving the request. So he received the request and then processes it. And then he forwards it to the appropriate web service, okay, who check the details. So the web service handles the request over here and then performs the necessary action, querying the database and executing the logic and sends a response back to the API, okay. When all of that is done, then the API, the web service will now push the feedback to the API. So the API receives the response from the web service and sends it, once he has received it, that whether the credit card is good or not good, then he sends it back to the client app. Okay. And then the client app, whether the mobile or the website, will display the display or uses the data received from the API to the user and say, oh, okay, your credit card has been accepted. You can go ahead and then pick up your goods here, or we'll transfer the goods directly to you, or you can download your ebook here. But if it's denied, then you can say, oh, sorry, this card cannot be confirmed, or please try again, or you can say anything that denies the user from accessing that particular service. So APIs are a very useful thing, technology that you come across in the process of web development. And popular APIs that we have here are RESTful APIs. It's a standard for designing network applications and communication between client and server. And we have GraphicQL. It's a query language for APIs that allow clients to request exactly the data needed. And we also have SOAP. We term it as so. An older protocol for exchanging structured information, web services. So these are popular APIs that we can find. This is an API, that's an API, and this is a web service. Okay. So the final technology that we'll talk about, that you have to understand as a web developer or a designer or someone who is interested in working on the web, is database technologies. Now, database technologies become important because sometimes users give us credentials or information that we need to hold. We need to hold them because eventually they come back needing it. They come back needing that particular information. So I'll say that Database technologies are the backbone for storing, managing, and retrieving data. You need to store the data, and when the data is given, you need to manage it. Sometimes you have to delete some items from it. Sometimes you have to add some items to it. Uh, and finally, you need to retrieve data when you need to. Okay. So retrieving data becomes important because when, so let's go through the process in a simple way. Let's say I go and create a Gmail account. When I'm creating, it asks me for my email, it asks me for a password. When I give the maybe Google those stuff, it is storing the data. It's going to store the data. So that's the first place. That's the first thing. If I come back and say, oh, my phone number has changed, so I'm coming to update my phone record, that is managing the data. Okay. From time to time, things will happen and I need to change maybe my address. Maybe I'm in Ghana now, maybe I've moved to Cote d'Ivoire or I've moved to South Africa or I've moved to Rwanda. Wherever I move, I will change my address on Google. And once I do that, it's managing the data. I have to delete my old data and re like re rewrite my new address. Okay, delete my old one and put in a new one. Okay, when I do that, I'm managing the data. Whenever I want to log on, whenever I want to log on, when I log on to my email, okay, and it compares and then the data is okay and it allows me in. And I'm checking my email. I am retrieving data that has been held in their database. When someone sends me a mail, it's held there. Whenever I need it, I can go and then retrieve the data. So database technologies that's or specializes on these three things: the storing of data, the managing of data, the receiving of data. That powers web application. Okay. And I'll say in context of web development, databases are used to store user information. User info, like the way I gave an example with creating a Gmail account, um, application content, transaction records. These are just examples and essential data. And they are typically accessed and manipulated by the back-end server. So I told you there is a front end, there is a back end. Okay? The back end is what the clients don't have access to. Okay? So if I want to delete something, the back end server with software will do that. If I want to access, the back end server will create access, which processes requests from the client's application. So the client says, oh, I want to see the data I gave to this database. And then when it enters that, the back end will process the request, and then send it to the front end. So all the front end sees is the received information or data that has been processed by the back end. It doesn't have access to the database, the entire database. It has access to only what it requested for, that it is allowed to access. Okay, or that he or she is allowed to access. And we'll classify some of them into relational and non-relational. These are the major categories. Relational databases, when we talk about relational databases, they organize data into structured tables and relationships or with relationships. So such databases include MySQL, PostgreSQL, and we have SQL Server. And sometimes we call MySQL. You see SQL. When you hear SQL, they are talking about SQL, they are talking about databases, and they are talking about SQL. Okay. So some people say PostgreSQL, and some people say SQL Server. Okay. It's the same thing. Um, So relational database, like I said, they organize data into structured tables, relationships, and it means that the data has structure. They have rows and columns. You can look at the data like an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, they have rows and columns. They are organized in very structured tables, and making them ideal for application requiring complex queries, data integrity. On the other hand, uh, NoSQL databases like MongoDB and Redis and Cassandra, they offer the flexibility for handling unstructured are like they don't have structured tables or semi-structured, which comes with a blend of both structured and non-structured, making them suitable for scalable and real-time applications. So NoSQL is like for unstructured stuff. Okay. SQL is for structured stuff. Okay. So I was saying that database example, SQL databases are relational. They deal with the relational database. Okay. Like the MySQL, PostgreSQL, and the SQLite. And the NoSQL databases are the non-relational because non-structured. Okay. Like MongoDB, Cassandra, and Redis. And all of these things, you see, these database apps are available. So when I come here and say MongoDB, understand that the internet is going to be your friend as a web developer. Anything you want to learn with Google today, you have an entire library in your pocket. At first, maybe you have to go to the library to pick up a textbook and then read. Now it's on our devices. Once you hit and you hit, let's say, the website, it will bring you information on their product, their services, what goes on, the database, some of the advantages. And you can always visit their communities, okay? The community forum, which is very important. So when you say join the community, it means that you are going to look at the community forums there. And it's very helpful because that's you can talk to other developers like you in that community. And it's a world of knowledge that is accessible to you instantly. Their experience is shared across. You can learn a lot from the community. Feel free to sometimes join some of these communities, what they talk about, what they share, their discussion. So you can see someone, this is French, someone writes memory storage, cluster. So people share information, a lot of very useful information in developer community. That's why it's let's say it's beneficial to the developer to um, be part of such communities. Okay? So like I was saying, with some of these things, MySQL, if you want MySQL, PostgreSQL, so you can just come to Google and then say MySQL. And Google will send you to the website for MySQL. And today, thankfully, we have very decent internet speeds. So it makes it very easy to learn. Okay. So Enterprise Edition, what is the free webinars? As you can see, there are webinars ongoing, on demand, what's new in, and some of these things will allow you to learn new technologies, updates that are going on. It says transforming government operations with open source innovation, unlock the power of MySQL Enterprise. That sounds exciting. Um, and sometimes there are white papers that they churn out, and you can take a look at some. And all these things, they deepen your knowledge in the field. Okay, they deepen your knowledge in the field. Um, and you can't take what, like you say, nobody can take what you read from you. Okay, the experience is always with you, and you always remember. And so we spoke about SQL database and we spoke about NoSQL. NoSQL is for unstructured databases or non-relational databases. Uh, so if you need to handle data that is unstructured, you're going for MongoDB, you're going for Cassandra, you're going for Redis. If you need to handle things that are structured, then you go in for MySQL, PostgreSQL, and SQLite can also help you. SQLite. Mm. And object-related mapping. Tools like Swift like JavaScript, Hibernate, and Entity Framework, .NET, that simplifies database instructions. Okay. So these are not like SQL and NoSQL. However, they they are written in either JavaScript, they are implemented in JavaScript, Java, or .NET. And if you understand these languages, then it means that you can use, like the way we use frameworks, you can use them to do your database interactions without understanding SQL as a language. SQL as a language. So with this, we'll come to an end of our, I'll say, web development technologies. Okay. Today we got exposed to the technologies that are available and how some of them are implemented, where to find them. And basically, we spoke about these 5 technologies. Okay. We spoke about web programming languages, and we said the languages that are front end, there are languages that are for back end. We spoke about the fact that some of the languages also perform a very specific purpose, like HTML for structure, CSS for styling, and, SQL for database or SQL for database, PHP, Python, Ruby. They are for back-end applications. And it's good that you have a taste of each of them, because sometimes you meet code somewhere and it can help you figure out quickly what that code is doing. And web development framework. We also spoke about front-end development frameworks like Angular, like Node.js, like React. React, we said React is a library developed by Facebook. We said Angular by Google. Then we said Vue by an independent community. These are front-end frameworks. And we also spoke about some of the back-end frameworks. And we said the back-end frameworks, they are for things like Python, they are for things like PHP, they are for things like, and we said that some of the back-end frameworks are Django. Django is by Python, Laravel by PHP, Express by JavaScript, and then the like. Okay. And we also spoke about Ruby on Rails. Okay, Ruby on Rails for Ruby. Okay, for the back-end framework. So back-end frameworks are used for back-end stuff. Front-end frameworks are used for front-end stuff. If you want a framework that does both front-end and back-end, then it means that you have to choose a framework that is full stack, how we call it. The full stack kind of does end-to-end. Okay? It has some front-end features and it has some back-end features as well. The third thing is content management system, third technology we spoke about. And we said that these technologies allow our users without any technological background to post content, okay, or to send content to the website without needing to know any technology that is involved, like HTML, CSS. They can even be non-programmers, but we give them some access. We design the content, the system, or the platform to give them some access, and they can post stuff just like writing an email in plain English, in plain text, in plain any language, add their videos, add their images, and they are good to go. So that's one useful thing about content management. And we said that very popular ones are the WordPress, the Drupal, and the Joomla. Okay. And finally, we spoke about this gentleman called the API, who we said was the middleman. He kind of coordinated information between two people. So, like the referee between two teams, kind of sets the protocols on how they can behave and what they can talk about, what they can't talk about. So, for example, the API will tell the client that, hey, You can request information, but you can't request for my client's total database. It's not allowed. You can give me one file, one name at a time. I'll go and check it and then bring it back to you. So it kind of regulates the two ends, the web service end and the client end. Okay. And then we said that the web service is the one, the holder of the database, the information that are created by the third party to be accessible by the ACI, the API. Okay. And we said that some examples of API are like the RESTful API, and we have the GraphicQL API. And we also spoke about database technology. Sorry, over here I wrote data technology. Is because I develop the slides ground up end to end. I write them myself. So sometimes if care is not taken, I miss certain things or there will be a typo somewhere. And some of the slides go all the way. For example, this one is like almost 20 slides, 3 out of the 19 slides. So I just have to please bear with me. So this is database technologies. Okay. This is database technologies. And database technology, we spoke about the relational and the non-relational. We said that the relational databases um, can be seen in the form of tables sometimes, tables, and they are more structured. So you have rows and columns, and it makes it easier to access stuff in there. But sometimes you have data coming in the format that is unstructured. It doesn't come in rows and columns. And you have to use another form of database called NoSQL. Okay, so we use SQL for database that is structured. And we said some examples of parts of where MySQL, which is MySQL, and we have PostgreSQL, we have SQLite. So these are for structured databases. Okay. And the unstructured, we said that one of the things which will help us really is some unstructured database, NoSQL. NoSQL, the language, and it has several vendors as well. And we spoke about databases that are hybrid, that use a hybrid between. That is, they run between the structured and non-structured. Hopefully, this is meant to, all of this is meant to introduce you to the available technologies you'll be coming across online. So if you find something that is interesting, it's worth noting it down. And eventually, I will, depending on the feedback I get from users and requests, what kind of videos they want to see, what kind of, then I will do, let's say, videos, or let's say I'll create content on some of these specific technologies that will help users build this. And so I think that brings us to the end of our website, technologies and implementation. In our previous lesson, we spoke about the web, the infrastructure of the web, and the web browsers. Today, we're speaking about the technologies. The next time, or in our next lesson, we talk about our users, the kind of experience, and the kind of interactivity we have. Thank you for sticking with throughout this presentation. Enjoy your day.